Last night I watched the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, and with that conclude the MCU Phase 4. It wasn't a bad conclusion. It wasn't a massive crescendo, more like an epilogue. I feel like Wakanda Forever was this phase's big kind of send-off, and this was like a 45-minute post-credits scene that kind of left you in a nice, heartwarming place. Full spoilers for the MCU Phase 4 ahead. I don't know what I'm going to go into, but full spoilers, be ready. The holiday special itself, it was decent. I thought it was good. Overall, I thought it was good. It had two big musical numbers. I'm not a fan of musical numbers, but they were fine. They were passable. It was a heartwarming story of Peter wanting to experience Christmas. Well, not even wanting to experience, just Christmas being special to him, but being so far away from home where no one kind of celebrates Christmas. And the story is Mantis and Drax kind of teaming up, going on a little adventure to Earth, getting involved in some shenanigans, and trying to kind of bring a little piece of Christmas back home to Peter. It's heartwarming. It builds on the lore a little bit. The Guardians are now running nowhere. Mantis is Peter's sister. Kevin Bacon is officially a character within the MCU. It's a cool little tale. And it's a different one. It very much feels like a special. There's no villain here. Like many projects in the MCU, Phase 4 does its best to escape the traditional formula that the MCU has solidified with a diamond-hard consistency. I enjoyed it. I think it's good. And I think as well, even if you're not an MCU fan, it's a fun little sci-fi Christmas story. It's worth watching. However, Phase 4 of the MCU, I'm not so sure I can say the same about. And that's really disappointing to me. Because I look at my relationship with the MCU over the years. I think about Phase 1. I thought Iron Man was okay. I didn't like Iron Man 2. The Incredible Hulk was okay. I didn't like Thor at all. I didn't like the first Captain America at all. Generally, I thought this whole... this is at a time where not as many people were aware that they were building to Avengers. It was just, here is the time of superhero movies. And you had this bunch of characters, but you also had Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. You also had Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and you had the original X-Men films. I think the X-Men films was the only ones that really gelled. I think Spider-Man hit in a kind of childish kid's way. The Dark Knight trilogy is a very good trilogy, but it didn't resonate with me at the time. The X-Men films were on and off good, but I think those were the ones that I really enjoyed. And eventually, then you got Avengers. And it was like, okay, well, this is what Iron Man, Captain America, Thor were building up to. And I watched Avengers, and I thought, I don't care about any of these people. I don't find this film funny. The action is so-so. I moved on. I didn't think about it again. But they kept coming. Phase 2 comes out. Once again, I didn't like any of the films. In fact, there was only one film that I enjoyed out of the entirety of Phase 2, and that was Guardians of the Galaxy. And I enjoyed it as a one-off film. I enjoyed it as its own separate, unique thing. But then we get to Phase 3. At this point, we've now had years of Captain America and Iron Man and Thor, Hulk, all teaming up. But now you check in Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is fighting against Captain America, and all the characters that have been introduced in the film so far are fighting against each other. Okay, you got me intrigued. So I go and I watch Civil War. I think it's a really good movie. Okay, cool. After that, it's hit and miss. Spider-Man Homecoming, pretty good movie. Doctor Strange, okay, it's alright. Black Panther, didn't like that one. Ant-Man and the Wasp, didn't like that one. Captain Marvel, didn't like that one. Then you get to the big finish. Avengers Infinity War. People lose their minds. Holy shit, this is a fantastic fucking movie. I didn't like it. I didn't care about any of the characters. Still, I liked that the Guardians were in it. There were some funny lines thanks to them. Thor, a character who, once again, I should say that Thor Ragnarok was a fucking fantastic movie. And was really one of the most... I can't think of a time where the third movie in a trilogy is by far the best, other than in the Thor trilogy. But it fucking was. The interactions between the Guardians and Thor were just hilarious in Infinity War. But then you get the big twist, I guess, at the end, which is Thanos snapping away half the universe, and I couldn't care less. Because knowing there's a part 2 coming, knowing that there's an Infinity War part 2, it's so obvious that they're all coming back. And I remember people saying at the time, oh my god, the stakes. Like, I can't believe they did this. This is crazy. Like, this is such a ballsy move. And I thought, this is the safest move ever. Of course they're bringing them back. Like, I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know if they're going to find the Dragon Balls or they're going to go another route. But of course they're bringing everyone back. They didn't spend all this time building this universe just to knock everyone off, especially when some of them still have ongoing storylines. But then you get to Endgame. I don't care how you feel about the MCU. If you didn't like it at all, if you loved it, or if you were so-so, there's a couple movies that are good, but I'm not a fan, like I was. Endgame's a great film. It is flawlessly paced, fantastically structured. It's funny, it's intriguing, and it's something that's never been done in cinema. It's a film that acts as a conclusion to, 23 films at that point? I don't know, I think it's about 23. 23 films, and somehow nails it. The character arcs and the endings that it gives to the characters that live and the characters that die are all perfect. And that film hit me at the right time, where I then became obsessed with Marvel. And I went back and I watched all the films again. And I watched them in chronological order. And I spent months working out a timeline of how they all interconnected. And I didn't just stop with the films. I watched the Netflix shows, The Punisher, Daredevil, Defenders. I watched the ABC shows, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Inhumans, Agent Carter. We pulled in Cloak and Dagger. We got Runaways in there. I even went back and watched stuff that wasn't related to the MCU. I went back to the X-Men. I went back to Ben Affleck's Daredevil. I really went in the weeds there. Endgame inspired me to kind of see, okay, I see what you're doing here with this massive interconnected universe that is being produced across countless studios. Let me see the story in its entirety. And it took me about 2 years to get through it all. And in its entirety, it's not the greatest story, like, to be fair. Like, a lot of the stories that are told are very average. I'm looking at you in Humans. But it's just, I think, within storytelling, and you can see this in games like, say, Fire Emblem, which took me like 100, 3 houses took me 100 plus hours to beat. Sometimes a big part of feeling that connection to a story and connection to characters is purely just the amount of time you invest. And with the MCU, there is so many shows, so many films. It's thousands and thousands of hours of content. That even if you don't connect with all of the characters, you're engrossed in the universe. So you can see then why, after the big delay caused by COVID, you get to phase 4. It's the beginning of the next saga. The Infinity Saga's over. Now we're in, what is it, the Multiverse Saga, I think? I'm fucking pumped. But that's why I'm so disappointed with what we got. We got such a large amount of content. Let's have a look here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 films. 7, does that count? Yeah, 7 films. And with Disney bringing everything in-house, producing all their own shows, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is it 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 8. 8 Disney Plus series. The films, what do we have? We have Black Widow, Shang-Chi, The Legend of Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. In the TV series, it's weird to call them even TV series. In the streaming series, TV series, we had WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, and She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. My problem was coming back, now very invested in this universe. How did you manage to let me down, Marvel? I'm looking at the films here. Black Widow, it was all good. I wouldn't say it was a bad film. There were definitely bad parts to it, but overall I'd say it's a good film. Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings, thought it was a great film. Thought kind of the hero origin story, but from a cultural background, very different to anything that we've seen before. It felt very fresh. I loved it. But then you got Eternals. Once again, I love the idea of doing some kind of deep lore sci-fi type experience. It didn't nail it. This felt way too much like Justice League. Funnily enough, even without Batman and Superman, this was a better Justice League. But it still felt like it felt like a fucking slog to get through that movie. Spider-Man No Way Home, I do not understand why that was not the Avengers of Phase 4. Like, why did that? I mean, I understand that's probably from a business position, that Sony wanted it to come out earlier, but dear God, if they could have held on to it in place of Wakanda Forever, this should have been the finale of Phase 4, because it was Avengers Endgame level. This was a great movie, incredibly well paced, and somehow, and this is the crazy thing, because you look at Eternals, you look at Justice League, you look at even something like The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and you see time and time again how hard it is to create a good film with a large amount of characters that need to be introduced, and it not feeling like it falls apart. Granted, No Way Home has the benefit of the fact that it's pulling from characters that people know from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, even Venom, and now the Tom Holland trilogy. So people do have somewhat of a background with these characters, arguably, but still, the fact that it adds new dimensions to 5 or 6 different villains, while still telling a very grounded, emotional Peter Parker Spider-Man story with Tom Holland that links in Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man without it feeling like they're just there for the sake of it. They actually feel integral to the specific story that's happening with Tom Holland's. It's a fucking masterpiece, and I don't know, it's silly. It's silly narratively that wasn't the conclusion, because I may have felt very differently about the entirety of Phase 4 if it ended on that much of a high note. But the fact that the Phase 4 was like kind of, it was okay, then it had that big high, and then just felt like it went fucking down from there, is a bummer. Because then you got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the first film that was going to go into the multiverse, really finally let us have fun in that playground, fell flat. It was cool, for the 5 seconds that we saw Professor X and we saw John Krasinski's Mr. Fantastic. But other than that, the film was very much a letdown. It was very flat. America Chavez was not an interesting character at all. Doctor Strange felt very watered down, and felt like he'd lost a bit of his personality. And Wanda, I don't know. Wanda was a weird one because it was cool seeing her as this villain with these kind of horror themes attached to her. That was awesome. But after watching her arc in WandaVision, this did feel like a kind of weird jump of like, she was a villain in that show, but it was because of this intense grief she was feeling. And once she realized the damage she was causing, she felt that guilt and she did kind of free everyone and turn away. But then in this, she's just full on villain, and it kind of makes you think, well, what was the point of WandaVision? Because her arc in that was the realization that she was becoming a villain through her grief. But in this film, it kind of goes, oh, well, fuck all of that. She's just a straight up villain now. And it also, and that kind of highlighted an issue with the connection with the Disney Plus shows. Like, yes, WandaVision and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness are more connected than Daredevil and Captain America Civil War were. But that connection can also lead to issues, like I say, because when you are someone who just watches the films and you've gone from Wanda in Endgame to Wanda in Doctor Strange, suddenly out of nowhere, she's transformed with no kind of explanation. She's transformed from a hero who was struggling very hard with grief, but not even that hard. You don't see her grieving. You see her grieve when Vision dies, but you don't see her grieve any more than, say, Hawkeye dies when Black Widow. Hawkeye grieves when Black Widow dies, or how other characters grieve when Tony dies. It's not that different. So for her to then show up in this as this kind of like demon-like villain feels weird. But then if you're someone like me who did watch the Disney Plus show, which kind of does attempt to bridge that gap and show how she kind of became somewhat of a villain without even realizing it through the deep grief that she felt, even for me, the film didn't really work because it felt dismissive of her arc in the show, that she was just such a demonic, unempathetic villain. It was fucking... Point being, it was weird. I don't think they nailed it. Then you got Thor Love and Thunder. Fuck me, what happened? What the fuck happened with Thor Love and Thunder? Taika, everything he's made is such a well thought through, funny, heartwarming character piece. And Hemsworth nailed the reboot of Thor and Ragnarok. And Disney seemed to kind of understand the golden goose that they'd somehow managed to fucking find there. And yet, Love and Thunder, after Ragnarok was arguably, in my opinion, the best film of Phase 3, Love and Thunder is by far the worst film of Phase 4. It feels like... I don't know what it feels like. It partially feels like that Taika and Hemsworth were like, you know what, we actually don't give a fuck about this movie, don't give a fuck about these characters, we can't do what we really want, let's just have fun for ourselves, just make as many jokes as we can, and we'll film it, and we'll just put it out there. But I just can't believe that the two of them would release a film with such carelessness. You know, and so then it makes you think, well, was Disney just so ham-fisted in what they wanted it to be for business and merchandising reasons that they forced the film to go in certain directions that just did not work? Because, I mean, like I say, you look at it, and the whole plot just feels like you had a home run set up there. You have Thor, he's in his adventures in space with the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is how they set up. But in the film, the Guardians are out within 5 minutes. They're gone. most of the film should have been dedicated to Thor's adventures with the Guardians. It should have been Thor's adventures with the Guardians. They then come across Gore. They then work together. Maybe they split off for a bit. There's a big fight at the end. You can fit in Jane Foster's Thor in there. But yeah, I can't even think, because of this movie aggravated me so much. I mean, the fact that they lose the Guardians at the beginning, what the fuck? And that they then trade them for going back to Valkyrie, back to Korg, which they were great characters in Ragnarok, but they served so little narrative purpose in Love and Thunder. It just felt like shit. Well, this is all we've got. These are the only guys that were free. Everyone else were busy with other contracts. The plot line with the kids of Asgard, Jesus Christ, that was cheesy. It was shit. Especially the fucking, was it Heimdall's son? His floating head kind of, yeah, Jesus Christ. It was fucking trash. And then the fact that the ending bit is the bit that got, I mean, one, don't even get me started on all the kids having the power of Thor. I mean, that should have been a battle with the Guardians of the Galaxy. It should have been a battle with but somehow we got the kids of Asgard doing some bloody Saturday morning cartoon fight, which was just horrific. But the ending is the craziest part to me, because the ending is just like, it felt like just an absolute either lack of understanding or dismissal, or just, I don't give a fuck feeling about any of the actual characters' arcs. Like, Gore the God Butcher, the whole point of his character is he's disillusioned with the gods. He views them as these wise, benevolent beings who care for their worshippers. And then right at the beginning of the film, he sees that, no, they're selfish, and they don't give a fuck about the people that pray to them, and they are not worthy of devotion. And so he turns on them, he tries to kill them, and he kills many of them, and he dedicates his life to kind of showing that the gods are not what they pretend to be. But then you get to the end of the film, and he has an opportunity to save his daughter as Jane Foster is dying in Thor's arms. Now, if you look at the character arcs of both Gore and Thor, Thor's character arc so far is that he has lost person after person after person. He has taken hit after hit after hit, and he still has a smile on his face. But this is essentially Jane is the last person he's got left. And it's alluded to in the film that, like, he can't lose her, because if he loses her, he's lost everyone. It's a ridiculous amount of loss for a character to experience and not give in to depression. So he can't lose her. But Gore, in this moment, also wants to bring back his child and deal with his grief and his loss. Now, for his character, it would make perfect sense for his arc in this moment to see Thor, see him holding Jane in his arms, grieving the imminent loss of her as he did with his daughter, and seeing the gods are not what I hoped they would be, but I can be better. I can do what they didn't and be selfless. And instead of bringing his daughter back, he could have given Jane new life, and then Gore could have died, and he would be with his daughter in death. And Thor can then leave behind the Guardians of the Galaxy to go and fucking do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 on their own, and he can go off and have his adventures in space with Jane, who's kind of got a new lease on life, both literally, but also in the sense of being the hero Thor, who she kind of, over the course of the film, is like learning to be. Instead of that ending, which is heartwarming, which makes sense, which would definitively conclude Gore's character arc in a satisfying way, and Jane and Thor's character arcs in a satisfying way, that would leave them both open to either never be touched again or to be brought back in later films. Instead of fucking doing that, Gore acts just as all the gods did, brings his own daughter back,
knowing that he's about to die. So he's brought his daughter back to life only to fucking abandon her, which makes no fucking sense. Jane dies after the entire film is dedicated to setting her up, and then Gore turns to Thor, the guy who he views as this selfish cretin, and goes, "Oh, but you'll do the selfless thing, right? And you'll look after my daughter, won't you?" Why would he assume that? He hates the gods. He's seen no reason to trust them, no reason to think Thor's any different. And he just goes, "Yeah, well, you look after my daughter there, cheers." And then he fucking dies. You know, and then the ending of the film is just suddenly Thor's a dad now with a daughter. And that makes it, like, fucking, it still pisses me off. I could talk about it forever. That film fucking pisses me off. It's equivalent to and worse than the scene in Infinity War where Quill botches the fucking capturing of Thanos because he can't hold in his emotions around Gamora being dead for a second, wakes up Thanos, and then Thanos wipes out half the universe. It's like, that moment for me in Infinity War was fucking annoying, because it's like, Quill is one of the most fun, interesting, likable characters in the MCU, and then you have him do something that's so dumb and unlikable. It's like, oh, that's so annoying that you did that to him, because I fucking love that guy. Why did you have to make him do such a dumb fuck thing? This whole movie felt that one scene. This whole movie was like, why are you ruining Thor? Like, you've ruined this franchise now. You've ruined this character. If you'd left him alone after Endgame, it would have been perfect. If you were going to bring him back and do something else, show the same level of care that Ragnarok did, because I don't know. And like I say, I don't know who to blame. I can't believe that this would be Taika, because, I mean, you look at Jojo Rabbit, you look at Boy, you look at Hunt for the Wilder People, you look at Ragnarok. They're all such cared for films with really thoughtful character arcs, really heartwarming tales. He knows how to make a fucking movie. I don't understand how this one was such a mess. I really don't, unless it's to do with business reasons. And then you finish it up with the final film, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which once again was fine. It was a heartwarming tribute to Chadwick Boseman. I think they handled that part well, and I think the acting from Letitia Wright plays his sister. Is it Angela Bassett who plays his mum? I think so. But the acting from all the characters in the film, all the actors in the film, is fantastic. It's really believable grief, and I guess, you know, they had the death of Boseman in real life to pull on for these scenes, but the death of T'Challa in the film is very well done. It's very well done. But once again, the story with Namor. Namor's a cool character, but I just feel, once again, the plot, by this point, I go, yeah, I've seen this film. I've seen this film 7 times at this point. You know, you're adding a new coat of paint. You know, it's got a different skin. It's like Fortnite. There's a different skin on my character. It's the same fucking game, though, isn't it? And once again, you get to the ending. It's always the ending where the MCU seems to botch it. When, you know, they set up this interesting premise with Shuri, in that, you know, and this was the best part of the film, I think, because that when she consumes the vibranium flower, she sees Killmonger, and she relates to him and his quest for revenge, rather than seeing her father or her brother and relating to their kind of quest for wisdom and peace. And the fact that, with how dark her character was getting, with how angry and grief-driven her character was getting, it reminded me a little bit of Ellie from The Last of Us. I thought she was going to, like, go in her own direction, and they were going to make Shuri her own character, where it's like, she's not T'Challa, she's ruthless, she's savage, she kills Namor because she is so driven by grief. No, they don't do that. They don't do something, like I said, they don't do something fucking interesting. God damn it, MCU. They make her make the exact same choice T'Challa made. The exact same choice every character in the MCU would have made. And that's that's my biggest problem with a lot of this MCU stuff, and I'm going to get there with some of the Disney Plus shows. It's the fact that this feels like the fucking McDonald's of storytelling at this point. I've had different points with the MCU. I've had points where I didn't care either way, I just wasn't interested. I've had points where I really didn't like any of the stuff I was seeing, and I've had points where I loved it. But it's getting to the point now where it's realizing that it's like there can be greatness within the MCU. There are some great films. Ragnarok's a great film. Endgame, No Way Home, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2. Great films. You can have a great burger from McDonald's. But there's a lot of shit. There's a lot of shit that all tastes the same. It's that generic fast food entertainment. Every one of these heroes has got to be the same. Every one of these heroes has got to follow the same formula. Every one of their plot lines has got to follow the same formula. There can be some deviations, you know. You can get a McDonald's burger with lettuce. You can get a McDonald's burger with cheese. You can get a chicken one. But it's the same fucking burger at the end of the day. These are the same movies at the end of the day. And I feel that sentiment is heightened by the shows. I think, and it kind of feels like the Star Wars problem, where they started making films like Rogue One and Solo, and it started to be like, okay, this is too much. That's how I feel now with the Disney Plus shows. Because at least when I was going back and rewatching the other stuff, The Punisher and Daredevil felt really different from Iron Man and Spider-Man in the movies, right? Runaways felt really different. Cloak and Dagger felt like its own thing. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. felt like its own thing. They were all in this universe, but they all brought out very different vibes. They felt like, yeah, they're about superheroes and they're dealing with similar themes, but they could go in different directions, and that kept it a little bit fresh, and it made it palatable to consume all this content. But now, with it all being in the hands of Marvel Studios, everything feels so similar. So I look at the shows. You know, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Hawkeye, they both feel like generic films within them. They feel like they could have been any of the other films. They're these action movies with quippy characters, but they're just longer. Instead of 2.5 hours, it's 6 hours. You have some variation, but even within that, it's minimal. WandaVision and She-Hulk Attorney at Law. They try and add in a sitcom element. She-Hulk, I feel, is more successful. It's more enjoyable as a show, but once again, and even when it acknowledged that it was trying to change up the formula, I don't know, She-Hulk was the best one, I guess, because one of the other things that has fucking plagued the Disney Plus shows and really let them down is the fact that, once again, it's a business decision. Disney just doesn't have as much content as Netflix. They're just not producing as much content. And so when it comes to Star Wars, when it comes to Marvel, when it comes to most of their shows, to be honest, they're still releasing things on a weekly basis rather than releasing everything at once and binge watching. And that is a massive hit to how I've enjoyed their shows. Because when they come out once a week, we're not in the age anymore where people only watch one show at a time. We're not in the age where people go to work, live lives, do other things, and then they watch Friends at 6 o'clock in the evening. People watch a lot of different shows these days. They play lots of games, they read books, they listen to podcasts. We're consuming a lot of infotainment. So to watch one episode of Moon Knight and then come back a week later and go, fuck, what was going on? It disconnects you so much from the story and the characters. And so for me, it makes me go, well, I want to binge watch this. I want to save up all the episodes, watch them all at once, so I can really get into the experience. But we live in the day of the internet as well, and it's very hard to have a show come out in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or in the Star Wars universe, especially a good one with good twists, and not have it spoiled, not have all the juiciest moments shoved in your face on TikTok or Instagram or news sites before you get around to binging everything. So the actual business model, which I understand because they're just trying to keep people on the service rather than having people sign up for a month, watch everything, and then cancel their subscription. But that business decision is affecting how their content is enjoyed, at least for me. Because, and that's what I say, that's why I think She-Hulk did the best, because that sitcom formula where you were watching one episode a week, and the story, it was interconnected, but it wasn't so important that you kind of knew what happened last episode. It worked better. Being that sitcom formula, it also worked well that, like, random characters from the MCU would just come and make a cameo for an episode, and then they didn't have to be in a future episode. It was like a one-off cameo. It was fun. I enjoyed seeing Wong. I enjoyed seeing Abomination. Daredevil was really fun to see, although once again it comes back to that same fucking McDonald's problem, that now Daredevil, who was very gritty in the Netflix series, very different from a lot of the MCU characters, he's now jumping around, he's making quips, he's the fucking same as everybody else. Identical. Another cheeseburger on the menu. But the sitcom attempt was interesting. It was like, okay, this is a bit different, you know? But then you get to Hawkeye. Generic MCU content, but it's set at Christmas. You get to Moon Knight. Generic MCU content, but it touches on mental illness. You get to Miss Marvel. Generic MCU content, but it's someone of a different background. It's a teenage girl of East Asian descent. Once again, yeah, we're getting the same problem again and again and again. It's a new skin in Fortnite. That's it. Like, and they're not even good skins. Look at Miss Marvel. Definitely think that's the worst of the Disney Plus shows. If you're looking for some kind of superhero content to watch Endgame. Watch Spider-Man No Way Home. Watch The Batman. Watch Joker. There are so many different pieces of superhero content that are out there. Even if you get away from Marvel and DC, watch Invincible. Watch The Boys. There is better superhero content out there than Miss Marvel. And then if you go, but there's the unique element of she comes from a different background. She comes from this East Asian descent. But I mean, if you're looking for a show about a girl from that region of the world who's a teenager, who's also trying to live an American lifestyle while dealing with the kind of religious and cultural customs of her parents and grandparents, I mean, watch something like Never Have I Ever. That's a great show that I feel like tackles very similar themes, but way more effectively. This is what I say with stuff like Miss Marvel is representative of Marvel taking their formula, which for someone who watches all of their content is tasting very fucking bland at this point, and they're adding in a slight change, a new sauce, a new garnish. But if you're looking for that sauce or garnish, there are other places where you can find it implemented better. And so that brings me, I guess, to where do you go next with Marvel? Because at this point as well, I think the final note to make, I didn't enjoy Phase 1 until the MCU. I loved Phase 3. But the whole time I could see where it was going. You can see, like, the first phase is they're doing all these movies to do this big team-up movie. The second phase is they're doing a bigger team-up movie. The third phase is, okay, we're bringing in all these other characters now that have their own individual stories and they're all off in their own individual directions, like Black Panther and Captain Marvel. But they're all going to factor into Endgame and Infinity War in significant ways that feel like it makes sense that we had all of these characters introduced to us, because this amazing finale is utilizing them all in very effective ways that are crucial to the plot. You don't feel that in Phase 4. Phase 4 feels like a binge of junk stories. One or two of them are great. A small handful of them you can argue are good. A lot of them are just okay to bad. None of them feel interconnected. There's a WandaVision to a Multiverse of Madness here and there, which arguably doesn't land. But you get to Wakanda Forever, and you get to the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special that are wrapping things up. And none of it really connected. And so it just feels like I watched. How many shows? How many fucking shows did I watch? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 shows, and I think it was 7 films. Yeah. It just feels like I watched 8 shows and 7 films. And that they weren't interconnected, and that they didn't matter to a larger story with one another. And in that case, why didn't I watch 8 shows and 7 films that were just randomly different films and shows by different creators and different directors, but told effective, unique, interesting stories? Why am I interested in the MCU stories when they're not as effective, when it's story-wise, they're not good stories, a lot of them. They're not. But because they're connected to one another, I'm going to watch them all? I don't know. I'm starting to doubt myself at this point. The last couple of years, I've been such a big MCU fan, but I don't know. Phase 4 is... I can't believe I'm saying this. Phase 4 has left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I think they've lost me, you know? And who are they to fucking care? But I wonder how many people feel like me out there, where it's like, they were like, okay, you've got me hooked, but now this just feels like too much, and it's directionless, and it's not of a good enough quality for the amount of time that you're asking me to sell you, and I need a break. And I think for Phase 5, even though there are things that I'm interested in, I'm curious about Quantum Mania. I'm really looking forward to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I don't really care about Thunderbolts, but, you know, I wonder what direction it's going to go. You know, further down the line, Deadpool 3, Fantastic Four, I want to see what they're doing there. But I think I need a break. And so with Phase 5, I don't think I'm going to watch any of the films, or I'm only going to watch the ones that look interesting to me as standalone films, rather than watching them just because they're a part of the MCU. And maybe when it comes time to watch Thunderbolts, I'll go back and I'll check out the movies and the shows that have come out over the last 1.5, 2 years, and maybe I'll do a binge over the course of a couple weeks to prepare me for the end of Phase 5. But I don't think I'm going to watch each show and movie as they come out anymore as a dedicated fan. I think even within the experimentation they've tried to make in this last couple years, the MCU has proven that they are the fast food of storytelling. Greatness can occasionally be found there, but more often than not is mediocre, formulaic content. And in this day and age where there is so much competition and great films like The Menu only make 50, 60 million at the box office because they don't have that big name behind them, and people are less willing than ever to take a chance on something random and go and see things and go and see brands that are tried and true, and they know what they're going to get. Even if they're not going to get greatness, they know they're going to get passable. The MCU thrives. I just don't think it's for me. Maybe not anymore, maybe just not for a little while. So, I don't know. If I was going to rank the MCU Phase 4, I give it a 6 out of 10.